Welcome back to the History Show here on Uxbridge FM, and our guest again today, local historian Ken Pearce, is here. Hi, Ken. Now, today's story is the cinemas of Uxbridge. When you're ready, Ken.
Yes, thank you. In 1909, a man named Jack Hutton came down from London and rented Rockingham Hall in Frey's Place, and he and his wife opened a cinema there. The building still stands, incidentally, as now an office. At the New Flicks, there were 2 showings daily, and admission was 3 and 6. A pianist was employed to accompany the short, silent, black and white films. This first cinema proved so popular that Mr. Hutton was soon looking for larger premises. A small building used for plays and variety shows already existed in Vine Street, and this was now replaced by a large brick-built building, and Mr. Hutton reopened there as the Electric Empire Cinema in September 1911. There were seats for 400 people, and there were occasionally variety acts between the films. One memorable act saw a local cyclist, a Miss Tyler, balancing herself on her bicycle as she played the violin. In 1917, the Royal Flying Corps took over the Hillingdon House estate on the outskirts of the town, and it became their armament and gunnery school. One of the permanent buildings erected there was a theatre cum cinema, which opened in May 1919. It was open to the public between the 2 wars, and so Uxbridge got its second cinema. The Uxbridge Public Rooms, as they were called, occupied a site at the junction of High Street and Vine Street. Their name, nevertheless, fails to conceal that they were never publicly owned. The public rooms in 1920 were owned by a man called Sidney Fasnage, who sold out to a syndicate who wished to convert them into a cinema. They were successful, and so the Savoy Cinema opened there in 1922. There were seats for over 1,000 patrons, and there were tea rooms on the premises too. Not far away, the Empire Cinema, faced with this competition, was forced to close. And rather strangely, the building became Uxbridge Fire Brigade Station. In 1931, 2 men, the brothers Abrahams, bought a site at the eastern end of the High Street and produced plans for a cinema. Work began in June 1931, and amazing, the building was ready in 6 months. Architect E. Norman Bailey created a striking Art Deco interior. The cinema opened on Boxing Day 1931. There was no gallery, but just a long sweep of over 1,700 seats. A Compton pipe organ with detached console stood in front of the stage. There was a car park adjoining with spaces for 300 cars and a large restaurant on the first floor of the frontage. Ownership of the Regal Cinema passed to Uxbridge Entertainments Limited in 1933, but the cinema later became part of the ABC chain. A few years later, the Odeon chain acquired a large site at the other end of the High Street. Originally, of course, an Odeon was a hall or meeting place in ancient Greece, but the owner of the group was a man called Oscar Deutsch, and so he invented a new meaning of the word Odeon. Oscar Deutsch entertains our nation. The new Odeon Cinema opened in Uxbridge on the 20th of June 1938 with a grand opening ceremony. Local councillors were invited, and also there were the actress Anna Neagle and Sabu, the elephant boy, a young man brought from India who became a film star at the time. Film studios, of course, were now operating at Pinewood and at Denham, and it was quite usual for celebrities from the studios to appear in local cinemas at special events. The new Odeon had 1,215 seats in the stalls and 622 in the gallery. Architect Andrew Mather. There was a car park adjoining. By now, in both the Regal and the Odeon cinemas, there were Saturday morning sessions for children, although these were suspended on the outbreak of World War II. The RAF cinema, of course, was closed to the public during the war and never reopened. Uxbridge, though, now had 4 cinemas: Savoy, Regal, Odeon and RAF. And of course there were others not far away at Hayes, Ruislip and Euseley. This was the great age of the cinema. On the evening of the 7th of November 1940, a small German bomb bounced off the parapet of the Savoy cinema and landed in the High Street. A woman in the house opposite and an RAF serviceman in the street were killed. But in the cinema, the showing of the film just continued, and it was only when they left the building at the end of the show that people became aware of what had actually happened. In the post-war period, the advent of television began to affect cinema attendances. So the smallest, the Savoy, closed in June 1960 and was converted to a bingo club, latterly run by Ladbrokes. The Regal closed down in November 1977, and there was a plan to demolish, but a local campaign to protect this architectural gem succeeded, getting the building listed as Grade 2 star. It has since become a nightclub, changing its name every few years. The Odeon cinema was converted internally to become a 3-screen cinema in 1976, but the move was unsuccessful and it was closed in 1982 and soon demolished. In its place rose a large office block called the Atrium, with a small cinema at its base, and that was Odeon number 2, a 2-screen cinema with a total of 669 seats. It opened in July 1990. But now cinema attendances were beginning to recover. So when a new shopping centre called the Chimes was planned, Odeon cinemas were included in the scheme. So Odeon number 2 closed in 2001 and the building became a fitness club, but the 9-screen Odeon 3 opened in the Chimes in March 2001. The Chimes, of course, has been since renamed into Uxbridge. One final note worth mentioning, the RAF cinema, of course, still stands by the main road there, not far from St Andrew's Church. It is a listed building, being now over 100 years old. But there are plans, which seem to take a long time to come to fruition, that it should become something we don't possess, a borough museum. Local history enthusiasts sincerely hope that will happen soon.
Including you, no doubt.
Oh, very much so, yes, yes.
Well, thank you very much, Ken, again. I can't believe there used to be 4 cinemas in the town. The Savoy, the Regal, the Odeon and the RAF. Did people just go to cinema all day?
Yes, yes. And Saturday mornings
yes.
For me.
Did you? Memories of going to the cinema?
Yes, yeah. Saturday. One of the things that annoyed me was that, of course, when war broke out, they did stop holding the children's Saturday morning sessions. And it was most regrettable that we were halfway through a serial, a Western story.
Oh, no.
And I never did find out the end.
I suppose there's a good excuse. There was a war on.
Yes, oh, that's right. Yeah, in fact, the cinemas themselves were closed for a brief period on the outbreak of war, but it was soon realised that that was a panic measure that was unnecessary, And of course, during the war, a cinema was a great place for people to go for entertainment, away from the horrors of what was going on in the world outside.
Escapism. Apart from if there's a German bomb bouncing on the balcony outside the Savoy, of course. Crikey. So from 1909, that was the first cinema just by the canal there.
By the
right
River
through
Fraser.
till now.
Yes,
Oh, by the Fraser River, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Did you ever swim in the Fraser? I hear that was a local tradition.
No. By the time I became of swimming age, there was a proper swimming pool, which of course is another story.
Another story for another day. Thanks so much, Ken. Join us again for more history of Uxbridge.
Thank you.